So I know that many of you are still working from home, or maybe just working from home on Fridays. And so we know that you're likely managing kids or pets that are needy, like mine. I kicked my dog out of the room today. But do what you need to do to take care of yourself. I think we have an hour and a half today. So if you need to get up and walk around or whatever, do what you need to do. And also, you likely saw that there are 6 different trainings. They are not different. They are the exact training 6 different times. But we just want to give people flexibility to pick days that work for them. So if you attend one, you do not have to attend more. And then currently everybody is muted. We ask that while we're getting through this presentation, because we do have a fair amount of stuff to get through today, to please put your questions in the chat. And I forgot to do introductions too. This is what happens when you record, I guess. I am Lauren Dressen. I serve as a secondary CTE data analyst, and I have 2 friends and colleagues here with me today, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Carly.
Good morning. I am Carly Switchley, and I work closely with Lauren around the data and help with the spring data. And then I also am the person you would probably contact for the fall program update.
And then we also have Gabby Sauce here today. She's going to be managing the chat for us. And so please use the chat function as we're going through the material today. And then I'm hoping that we have some time at the end after we get through the material to open things up for people to ask questions. And at that point, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. That is all you, Carly.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get us started and just kind of talk about the calendar of due dates that Lauren and I work with throughout the year, and what we've already gone through and where we are now. So, and many of you probably have various roles and only parts to play in certain events during the year. So hopefully this will give you a kind of a broad overview of what is happening all year long around data, and not just the one piece that you might be involved in. So the applications for programs of study for early bird, meaning that they will be approved earlier and before school ends for the year. Those applications were due at the end of the end of April, and then we are still taking applications for any new programs of study until the end of June. And I heard there was a goal to have all applications approved this year early. Usually we have through the end of the summer to approve our program of study applications. But I think we're trying to, since there haven't been very many, try to get them done and out the door so that people can get an answer. And then the CTE course and student data collections, which is why I think a lot of people are here today, because they want to hear about that, opened last week on May 13th. And they have a little bit, they will be open for a little bit longer this year. We gave a couple extra weeks, and they will close on July 19th. And that will be the end of the timeline for the student and course enrollment for this year. And then this, you'll see on the program update a 9*21, and that's because our new data system will be starting this fall. And so those dates for the program update, which we'll be doing in the new data system, are a little bit, and when we created this, it was normally it starts in the mid-September, and in the new data system, the program update will always begin on the 3rd August, or the 3rd Thursday in August. So these dates are approximate right now. And then we will update that as we get closer to the rollout of the new data system. And that's for the when it opens, and then when the schools are should be done working in the new, or should be done working on their part of the program update, and then the regional coordinators when they're done with their part, and ODE has gone through and approved all of the updates for the year. And then that takes us back next spring to where we are right now with the course and student collections all over again. Okay.
And as Carly mentioned, and we offered a couple of extra weeks, we got some emails from people saying that school years, might be going longer, just the onslaught of stuff at the end of the school year and trying to manage all of that. So we did offer a couple extra weeks for everybody. We just did an extension for everybody. That being said, as Carly mentioned, we are transitioning to a new data system this fall, and because of that, we cannot offer any reopens or extensions beyond July 19th. No exception. In the past, we have been flexible. We've been flexible with allowing additional time, usually in the last couple of weeks of August. We cannot do that this year because we do have to have a hard stop as we transition to that new system. So we understand that might cause some problems, but we're here to support as you're doing your data collection. Make sure we get it right the first time because we will not be able to grant those. I saw a question in the chat pop up. We'll be sending out materials after the fact, including these slides. So you will have that information. We can put that in the body of the email too. So that's very clear. Okay. Next slide, please, Carly. So I just wanted to hit on the 6 components of data quality. So these are the things that I think about when I'm looking at data as it's rolling in. And so data quality is really the ability for a given data set to serve an intended purpose. And we're going to talk about what the purpose of these collections are and where this information goes. But really looking for completeness of data, uniqueness, timeliness, validity, accuracy, and consistency. Those are kind of the 6 things that we look for when data is rolling in. And you all are really the best for verifying that all those things are true on the data submitted. We do our best to look at that stuff, but the reality is we don't really know exactly what's happening in a building, and we try to build our data system and business rules and errors in a way that try to catch as much of this stuff as possible, but know that you all are the experts in knowing what is actually happening in your schools. Next slide, please, Carly. So for those of you who have done these collections before, you are probably familiar, unless you're just a total rock star and you've never seen an error before. If that's the case, you should probably be running this training and not me. But some of the common issues that we see, I just wanted to highlight a few of those today so that you either know you're not alone in getting those, or just to kind of help you keep an eye out for some things as you're pulling your file and looking through your data before you submit it to us. We often see incorrect SIP and course codes, or combinations of those 2 things is probably the most common error that we see. And Carly's going to talk a little bit about why that happens and what we can do to mitigate that. But I believe that many of you are here because of the new fields that we have around work-based learning, and that's really why a lot of people are here, is to hear about that and what the expectations are there. So just so everybody knows, work-based learning type code fields are required in that either a student had an experience or they didn't, so it is not applicable. And in this case, and I think it's pretty consistent across collection, a Z code is not applicable. So the student didn't have one, but we chose to go that route so we don't have a bunch of blank fields, but that we have something in there. So for all 4 of the work-based learning type codes fields, you must have a Z entered into those fields. So if you do not, you will have a whole lot of errors. The other thing is that industry recognized credentials, we see errors on those a lot as well, making sure that the credential code and the SIP code are a valid combination. In addition to, if you enter something in for one of the four one of the four industry recognized credential codes fields, you need to enter something in for all four. So there's a SIP code, the credential code, date administered, and a pass, no pass. If you enter one, you've got to enter all four. And I think, and those are optional fields too. So if a student did not attempt an industry recognized credential, then there's no need to put anything in those fields and you will not get errors. So that is the difference between those work-based learning type codes and the industry recognized credential codes.
Hey, Lauren.
Yes.
When IT set that up, the new work-based learning places, was it not possible to default them so that the Z's don't have to be entered?
So that would be a student information system setup. So it should be that way. But that would be student information systems needed to have made that change in their system. So if they did not, what I recommend is I anticipate, and now we don't know for sure, but because work-based learning is new, and also because of COVID and probably fewer experiences are being offered to students due to that, if your student information system is not automatically putting Z's in those fields, if a student didn't have one, when you pull your file, put a Z in the top one and drag it all the way down. I mean, that's like the fastest way. If that is not happening in your student information system, it should be a pretty quick and easy fix in a file. And I think next slide, Carly.
Okay, so Lauren mentioned that the incorrect SIP and the incorrect course number were two of the most common errors that people will see when files get uploaded. And so we just wanted to talk a little bit about the part in the process where during the fall update where the information gets entered into the system that is going to cause those errors that you're going to see during your file upload during the spring collections. And I know that a big barrier for schools is that the person doing the program update in the fall and the person who's submitting in the data in the spring are always the same. And so we thought if we talked to everyone about it, then it might help just a little bit, make things a little bit easier for people. So in the fall, when we do our program update, the system is being updated to reflect all of the information that is in the student information systems. Because we want our system and the student information system to match with the courses that are being offered, the course numbers, and some of the other information, I mean, all the information of the course, but those are the big ones, is making sure that we have all of the courses under the SIP code for the program of study that the student information system has for that program of study. And so when they don't match, that's when you get the error because you upload the file and it shows maybe course numbers that we don't have in our system, or the course numbers are a little bit different. And so when you put that information into our system, when you pull it in your file and then it comes across and we get the information, there's no bucket for those courses or those students to fall into because we don't have the information in our system that reflects what's in your system. So this is kind of a picture here of what might have gone wrong. And I don't know, when you upload your file, your kids in your Ag 101 class come across, and we have Ag 101 in our computer system under Ag. And so the Ag student comes across and it has a bucket to fall into. The Welding 101 student comes across and we have Welding 101 in our system, and that student has a bucket to fall into. So the so it all aligns correctly. The same with health sciences. And then the green student, when the green student comes across, my little button to change the slides isn't working. The little green student didn't have a bucket to fall into, so you would have gotten an error. And so what do we do to fix it is we'll have to fix the errors, but then also just making sure that during the program update that all of the information in your system is what matches in our system is the best way to make sure that those errors aren't going to happen. Because as long as those buckets have been built in the fall, the courses under the program, it should alleviate a lot of those common errors that you get when you are uploading your student or course files in the spring. And if you are having errors like that, and I know this year we had all of the COVID courses, which might make things, hopefully everything is the same in both systems, but on the off chance that some things might not match, let me know, send Lauren and I or an email or send me an email, and we want to make sure that the students are getting credit for all of the courses that they took this year. And so we should hopefully can still fix it in our system to make it match your system. So if that is a problem, then let me know, and we will try to work through those errors together.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about, where does this data end up? And we can go to the next slide. And I think really what Carly talked about, that is the most common error that we see, is that there's something mismatched in the student information system versus what is submitted to us. That is the most common error that I see over the last 3 times that I've overseen these collections. That is the most common thing. So making sure that those align is really important. And we know that staffing and who gets assigned what is totally a local decision, but we recommend as a best practice, if the person who does the spring data collection be the same person who does that fall program update. That way there's continuity between that cycle. That seems to be what we've seen be the most successful. So where does all of this data go? We ask for an incredible amount of data every year. Where does it all go? So one of the first things, probably the most important CTE specific thing, is our 90% reports, which can be found in our Achievement Data Insight, and we'll talk a little bit about how to get there. These reports provide information around all of our Perkins performance metrics, enrollment numbers. There's a student detail tab in there, so you can see how many credits each student earned in each program. It also goes to our cohort graduation rate report. We added CTE concentrators and CTE participants into that report a couple of years ago to highlight all the great work that's being done by our CTE system. Career pathways funding. We use this data to calculate allocations for that funding source. We use it for civil rights reporting. We say that it is used to determine who gets the opportunity to have a civil rights visit. It also, a new exciting thing, we have a statewide longitudinal data system that is getting up and running. This data, we are actually the first group that is going to be doing matching to that system. So that allows us the ability to look at all kinds of things like employment outcomes for CTE students. So that's super exciting. And then the last thing is this information. We've had so much interest in the last couple of years on research and third-party groups wanting to do research on CTE in Oregon. So it's used for a ton of stuff. There's a lot of focus on CTE right now, and a lot of really exciting things. And the data is a huge part of that. So those 90% reports, that is really the foundation of why we do these collections. It's the federal requirement. It is the report So all this data gets rolled up and sent along to the federal government to say that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so that is the foundation. We've built off of that, and we've done other things with this data, but that is the foundation of why we do it. So some of the things that are in there is graduation rates by district, school, and program, concentration in a non-traditional career area by gender. So female students in welding and male students in health sciences, for example. And math, English language, arts assessment information. And just so everyone knows, not waived for 11th graders. Science assessment, which is a new metric that we're added, that actually was waived for 11th graders. So there will be no information for that metric this year. Post-secondary placement information, and then of course, our new piece of information that we're collecting around work-based learning experiences. So the 90% reports where to find them. So you all probably, this applications page looks familiar to you. This is where you go to do your data submission. But there is another thing there at the top, the achievement data insight. And that's where you'll find the output of these reports. So if you ever have administrators who are like, you know, hey, can you tell me information about CTE? This is where they'll find that information. So just a couple of definitions for you all. I'm sure that many of you have heard the term participant. So that is staying the same. That is any student who receives half a credit in a program of in an approved program of study. And then the next slide. So the secondary CTE concentrator definition is actually changing this year. So it used to be 1 credit in a program of study with half a credit being required. We actually have changed that definition. So it's now a student who's earned a minimum of 2 credits in CTE courses in an approved program of study. And at least 1 credit has to be designated as intermediate or advanced level coursework. So this is something. It is a fairly large change. It will impact all of our performance metrics. And in the fall, there will definitely be a focus when we're doing our trainings around the program update and switching to our new system. There's definitely going to be a focus on looking at how we're designating introductory, intermediate, and advanced to the courses and programs. Next slide, please. And so something that we make sure to always talk about, because we know that funding for programs is a lot of the reasons people do this and are concerned about getting the data right. I'm sure for those of you who have done the collection, you've probably had teachers come to you and be like, hey, I didn't get the money that I anticipated getting, what's going on? So we want to be really transparent about how do we get those numbers. And so there's 3 components of career pathways funding, and we think about each of those components as awarding a point to the program. So the first of those 3 components is students who take 3 or more credits within a program of study. It has to be all within one program of study. That can be 3 credits across, it's usually across their whole high school career. But just so you know, once they hit 3 credits in a program of study, that program will receive funding. So say they hit 3 credits at the end of their sophomore year, the program will receive funding for that student their junior year, their senior year, and 1 year following graduation because of the delay in data. So the sooner students reach 3 credits in a program, the better. And that is regardless of whether they continue to be enrolled in that program of study. Once they hit that 3 credits and ring that bell, the program continues to get funding regardless. Next slide, please. And then if any of those students who receive 3 or more credits in a program are historically underserved, which in this context is defined as students of color, students experiencing poverty, so economically disadvantaged, which is based off of free and reduced lunch, English language learners, or students with disabilities, that program would get an additional point for any of those students who were historically underserved and received 3 or more credits in a program. And then lastly, and it is independent of the other 2, any students who receive an industry recognized credential, that they pass their credential test or boards. The program would receive a kind of a one-time thing. So this is not transferable across years. So if you have a student who receives a credential their junior year and their senior year, they would get funding both years for that student. So just a quick kind of scenario to drive it home here. So if a student is both economically disadvantaged and experiencing disability, and they complete 3 credits within a health sciences program of study, and the student also received their Oregon CNA credential, how many points will this program receive for this student? And you can go ahead and throw that in the chat. Kelly, you're too fast. That's exactly right. So the program will receive 3 points for the student. Because the student is historically underserved, and they're actually historically underserved in 2 ways, although the program will only receive 1 point for that. You don't receive additional points. They were economically disadvantaged and experiencing a disability. And because they completed 3 credits in that program gets 2 points for that piece. And then lastly, that student was a total rock star, and they also got their pass their Oregon CNA. So this program would receive those 3 points, and each of those points are assigned a dollar value. So as we get more programs that are accessing this funding, that dollar amount per point has gone down significantly. It means that the funding source has done what we wanted it to, which was to get more students being deeply embedded in programs of study. So I think the first year we did this, it was about $850 per point. It was $235 last year. So programs are having to work harder to maintain the level of funding that they've had in the past. So if you have teachers going, I got less money than I anticipated, it typically isn't a data issue. It's typically just the pot of money has stayed the same, and more programs are accessing it, and more students are receiving 3 credits. And I think I had a question from Brandy. So teen parents and McKinney-Vento are not included in that data. Those are not one of the 4 called out historically underserved populations. Although my get with McKinney-Vento, economically disadvantaged is probably going to be where they fall under and would be categorized, and potentially for teen parents too, but they have to fall into one of those four categories that were outlined. That is the first time I've ever gotten that question. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about work-based learning and where that came from and why we're collecting that information now. So as many of you know, we transitioned from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5. It's been almost a year now, I think. And so there has been some changes. So we have 55 definitions now instead of 34. The federal government, when they passed this law, they were trying to link some of the other federal programs like WIOA and ESSA, trying to bring more of that stuff in alignment. And there's really an emphasis under Perkins 5 for in-demand occupations, programs of study, and multiple entry and exit points. And so we also added some additional special populations, which make a lot of sense. I think this was a great change that they made. So we will be adding some additional demographic groups into some of these reports that we put out. So these will not be things that we collect additionally. We collect those in other areas. We'll just be bringing those into those 90% reports. So homeless individuals, youth who are in or have aged out of the foster care system, youth with a parent the last one is youth with a parent who's a member of the armed forces or is an active duty military member. Next slide, please. So we've talked a little bit about it. Changes that one of the largest changes for switching to Perkins 5 was around data and accountability, which is why we have an hour and a half today, because there's a lot of changes that are coming up. So many of you have been doing this for years. Technical skill assessments, you cannot you cannot enter technical skill assessments anymore. We made them optional last year. There is no place to enter them in at all this year, which I think many of you were very happy about, that we didn't have to do that anymore. So we still have industry recognized credential fields are available in there and are required if a student attempted to get a credential. And then of course we added work-based learning type codes and work-based learning hour fields, which we will talk a little bit more about in another slide. So what is work-based learning? So the definition that is in our CTE state plan is as follows. I will pause here for a second so I can take a drink of water, and you all can, I don't need to read that definition to you. I'll let you all read that. Okay. Next slide, please. So the question that we get the most is, what counts as work-based learning? How do I know if that's something that needs to be entered into the data collection? And so there are really 4 criteria that a work-based learning experience needs to meet. So it needs to be aligned with a program of study, with the curriculum and the instruction. It needs to be a sustained interaction with industry, business, or community professionals. It needs to take place in a real, virtual, or simulated workplace setting, and it needs to earn credit or outcome verification. So things like feedback from industry professionals would be something that might be outcome verification. So those are the 4 things that it needs to meet. Next slide, please. Oh my gosh. So sustained, this is kind of like a piece that is really hard because it's a little gray. So we initially thought that hours would be a good way to measure whether something was sustained. We got a lot of pushback about how that might not be realistic to have really long-term experiences based on hours, especially for some of our smaller rural schools, that would be challenging to offer that to very many students. So it just needs to be prolonged or extended. It's not standalone or one day. It's not a job shadow. They can happen during a school term, during the summer, or short-term intensive opportunity. So the sustained interactions also require direct and ongoing interactions with industry, business, or community professionals. They foster in-depth firsthand engagement with tasks that are relevant to a given career field. And they align with the program of study, curriculum, and instruction. And they have measurable outcomes for students that are both academic, technical, and professional. Next slide, please. So why is this data being collected? I talked about it a little bit, but as we transitioned to Perkins 5, work-based learning was we had the opportunity to choose from 3 different metrics. Dual credit was one, industry recognized credentials were another, and lastly, work-based learning. And as a state, we selected work-based learning as the metric that we wanted to focus on. We felt that work-based learning was the most flexible for all of our schools because we have such a variance in how rural schools are versus urban, and size of school. This seemed like the one that people could sort of tailor to best fit their community. And so the program quality indicator is really looking at the following. So CTE concentrators. So again, that's students who've received 2 or more credits within a single program of study. At least one of those credits has to be in advanced or intermediate level coursework. Students had to have graduated high school, and this means we align this with our statewide graduation rate to be students who received a regular diploma, a modified diploma, or were enrolled in the postgraduate scholars program. And then lastly, of course, they had to be in a program of study aligned work-based learning experience at some point during their high school career. So we will bank that information. So if a student has a work-based learning experience as a sophomore, but doesn't become a concentrator till their senior year, totally fine. We store that information for you. Next slide, please.
Lauren,
Yeah.
there There is a question about earning credit. Is that as in a high school credit or college credit?
High school credit? Gabby, I'm looking to you to answer.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad you're here. Ricardo, I'm assuming you meant for the work-based learning piece of it.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm in the zone. I'm like, I don't know when these questions came through. Okay, yeah.
And then there's also another question.
So Josie, I'm gonna talk a little bit about that too, like what the responsibility of data submitters are versus teachers. I think if there are two things to take away from this training, it's that no extension on the collection and the slide I'm gonna talk about the expectation there.
Tammy, that's a really good question about CTE teachers being considered industry experts. We are going to be providing some guidance later on to the field regarding a process in terms of having CTE teachers be considered as industry experts. As you may think about or know already, what we are trying to do is not have the default be all CTE teachers or the community, business, or industry professionals. We're really trying to increase students' social networks and also their assets into the world of work. And we do want that to expand outside of the classroom when possible. So please stay tuned for some guidance about that process. And if there are continued questions, you can let us know. And Justin, you had a question about program. Sorry, let me. This year with being shut down, kids worked on their technical skills and then assisted in carrying out the meal program all year, including creating menus, performing prep, and managing other students. Would that count as work-based learning? So again, I would point to the 4 criteria that were touched on earlier when Lauren was talking. If it's aligned to a CTE program of study, instruction, and curriculum, if there's sustained interaction with a business, industry, or community professional, if obviously this happens either in the classroom, in person, virtual, or both. And then also if there was an earning of credit or some outcome verification that came with that, then yes, that would count as work-based learning. That probably would be counted. I apologize, I don't know yet if we've touched on the work-based learning types, but that would potentially be a simulated workplace type. So great question there. And I think that is all that was asked. So great questions, keep them coming, and we'll do our best to answer them.
All right, thank you I'm so thankful that Gabby's here to answer those in the weeds work-based learning questions. So where is this data collected? So it will be collected in the CTE student collection. Many of you probably remember the career-related learning experience or CURLY fields. Those have been decommissioned and we have stood up work-based learning fields and tweaked some of the options that are available there. It's collected on an annual basis. Experiences are collected at student level. So as of right now, we are not attaching those experiences to a you don't have to enter a zip code in for those work-based learning experiences, but remember they have to be tied to an approved program of study. So even though we're not asking for that information, we assume that that student is enrolled in a program of study and that experience is tied to a program of study. And we wanted to leave that flexibility because we knew that some work-based learning experiences would be relevant for multiple programs of study within a school. So we didn't want to tie it to just one. There are sometimes there are experiences that are relevant to multiple. Next slide, please. So just really quickly, so I want to share an example, and in the chat, let me know if you think this should be submitted in the student collection or not. So we have 11th and 12th graders that are National Honor Society members. They must complete 32 hours of road cleanup in the community. Road cleanups are overseen by an instructor from the school and a community member. Students must complete these 32 hours of community service over 4 weekends. should this be submitted into the CTE student collection? And why or why not? I think I saw, they're like rolling in fast here. Correct. Ricardo, that's exactly right. No, it should not. This is wonderful. We love this. Like, yes, students should do this. I'm pulling for personal experience. I had to do this. So yes, they should have to do this. It's great, but it is not work-based learning because exactly right. What program of study is this tied to? Yes, there's a community member. That's awesome. There's an instructor. It is over some time, over a prolonged period of time, but it's not tied to a program of study. So this would not be something we would be interested in having in the CTE student collection. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the work-based learning type codes are as follows: clinical, internship, practicum, cooperative work experience, pre-apprenticeship will be coming next year, school-based enterprise, service learning, and workplace simulation are the ones that are available, and keep an eye out for pre-apprenticeship for the 21-22 school year. And then those, again, those are required. There's also the not applicable option as well. And there is an hours field that is a companion field to each of the 4 work-based learning type code fields. So there are a total of 8 work-based learning related fields, 4 of each. The hours is optional. Like I said, we thought that might be a good way to determine sustained interaction, but people said that they didn't think that was the best way or the only way to do that. So it's available to you if that's something that you want to collect. And we also wanted to give schools the opportunity that might be how you want to track those hours. Next slide, please. So how is this data collected? I think a lot of people are curious about this, like how are other schools collecting this? We're not sure how we want to do this yet. And so we have left this to be a local decision. It allows schools and districts the opportunity to choose processes and systems that really work for them. What we've heard, so we did a series of work-based learning trainings in April and the beginning of this month. And we asked this question about how are people collecting this information? So we have some that are using proprietary systems that allow for super detailed tracking. So some of our really large school districts have really intense tracking. And then there are some third-party vendors out there that are national organizations that offer work-based learning data tracking systems. Then we have a lot of schools that are using Microsoft products, like they're just tracking in Excel or using Google products. And I think she's actually on the call today, but Laurel Smalley from Napa High School presented alongside me to talk about how they're collecting information and how they're using Google Drive to track this information, and students are dropping artifacts into their folder to track what they're doing. So it really is up to you what makes most sense for you in tracking this. We didn't want to be too prescriptive on that because what works for one school doesn't necessarily work for another. Next slide, please. So who collects the data? So I think there was a question earlier, and this is really about the expectation of who collects this data. So just a reminder, and we made sure to say this in all those work-based learning trainings, which were mostly made up of teachers and administrators, that this is really the final step in the process, is the submission of data. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen before it gets to us, before it's submitted to us. 99% of the work happens then. The submission is just the last piece. So our recommended who is involved in this process is data submitters. Of course, they're going to be really key to this. They're kind of the final line of defense. CTE teachers and CTE administrators have to be involved in this process as well. And so I think it's really important, I guess, to sort of free the data submitters from feeling like it's your responsibility to figure out whether an experience is work-based learning or not. That should be teachers and administrators should be responsible for making sure that work-based learning experiences are vetted. By the time it hits data submitters' desks, you should feel confident that those have been vetted well, and you just have to say, okay, this student got this type of experience. That should not be your responsibility to have to try to figure that out as you're submitting the data. And we, like I said, we have been very clear about that it needs to be well vetted. It should meet those criteria, and it should not be data submitter's responsibility to run an experience through those criteria and determine if it counts or not.
Hey, Lauren.
Yeah.
For the type codes are a drop down in the for each of the different work-based learning experiences.
Correct. And I will say too, I know that there was some delay. Obviously, there was lots of stuff going on in the last year and a half or so. I know that for some student information systems, it might not look how it will next year. I'll say that, like that they maybe didn't get it done the way they should. So there might be some delay on that. But in reality, yes, it should be a drop down in your student information system, and it should get pulled into your file automatically. I see, Kevin, you have your hand raised. Do you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself?
Thanks. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I understood you say earlier that the work-based learning could happen before the student became a concentrator and it would count.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it banks either way, right? So they could become a concentrator first and then have their work-based learning experience, or have a work-based learning experience before they become a concentrator, as long as it meets those criteria of being aligned to a program of study, sustained interaction with a business or industry professional, and have some sort of outcome verification, either feedback or credit, then yes, it would count.
So if a student did a work-based learning experience before they were in a program of study, then it wouldn't count.
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah. It needs to be aligned. It needs to be aligned in some way. All right. Next slide.
All right.
So, that's you. That is you. I get to
But you
take
can
a little
take it
breather.
if you
No.
So Lauren and I both mentioned a little bit that the new data system is coming. And I feel like people who have been to this training or the program update training are probably rolling their eyes at us because we have said that for a while. But this summer, the new data system should, we are starting to make the guidance for using the new data system. And when people get back in the fall, it should be ready to roll out, and we will start doing trainings and helping people get comfortable in that new data system, which unfortunately we don't have a picture to show you, or we don't have it to share with you to get in yet, but it is lovely, and it should be much easier for people to use. So we will start the initial rollout with the program update portion of the new data system this fall, but we should start training people, offering opportunities for training and guidance for using it come August. So look for that and for the training information. And then the program of study applications will be a part of that system as well, which will be nice for people who do the application work because it'll all be in the same place. There are going to be all of the reports that you would normally find on our website will be a part of the new data system. The approved program and course list, which Lauren and I both reference ourselves on probably a daily basis, and that we recommend other people look at on a regular basis when they're looking at the information that we have for their schools. That is the best place to do it. That will be part of the new data system. So we are really excited that it's, after years of being talked about, is finally coming to fruition, and can't wait to share it with you later this year.
All right, I'm going to drop the link to the chat in the chat for the approved program and course list that Carly just referenced. Please, 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 before you try a submission, just verify, especially if you're not the same person who does the program update, please verify that your course numbers that are being pulled into your file for the CTE course file match what is in our system. If it does not, you will get an error for every single record where there is a mismatch. So handling that on the front end and then emailing Carly or myself and letting us know that there is a mismatch ahead of time will save you a lot of trouble to not have to try to clear out all of those errors. So please take a look.
Angst. Saved angst.
Yeah, we don't need any more. There's been enough anxiety over the last year. We don't need any more. So just, yeah, double check those courses and make sure that those match. And I think we didn't talk about it, but we've helped people clean up most of this. But if you have leading zeros on any of your course numbers, just know that sometimes when you go to save that CSV file, it drops leading zeros. So you may have a mismatched course number because that leading zero got dropped. So just be careful about doing that. And if you do still have any leading zeros in your course numbers, maybe making strides to get those changed to not have leading zeros in your course numbers going forward. Yeah, Debbie, I see your hand.
Hey, thanks, guys. This actually goes around the leading zeros. Just want to verify something. So I do know that we have cleaned ours up and we still have one course that has a leading zero. And I noticed last year when we submitted, those kids didn't error out. So say example, our course code on the approved program was 03063 and we submitted 3063, right? Their leading zero wasn't in our file when we submitted it. If those didn't error out, are they okay?
They should be. And Debbie, I can offline too take a look and see, like, did they make it through? I will say our system is intelligent enough to kind of go, I think that's the same course number.
Okay.
So you'll often see it pop up as an error, but you literally just have to go into the record and just resave it. It kind of knows that's.
Yeah, I just noticed last year that I knew we had that situation and I didn't catch it before I submitted and they didn't error. So
okay.
I assumed we were good, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we can, if you want to shoot me an email,
Okay.
and I can double check for you, but it's sort of like I said, it's smart enough to know, but not totally smart enough to know for sure. So it usually asks for like verification, just resaving those records. But,
okay.
Yeah, we can double check offline.
Sounds good.
Too.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, next slide. So, just so everyone knows, I am transitioning out of my position on May 31st. Which I think is a holiday, actually. I think that's Memorial Day weekend. So up until the 31st, feel free to contact me. And I know a lot of you don't even start your submission until the second half of June anyway, but feel free to contact me directly up until the end of the month. And then at that point, Carly is actually going to be taking over the collections for this year until they hire somebody to replace me. As of now, I'll be gone for 6 months on a job rotation to another agency. So I won't be available in that regard. But Carly is going to be taking over and you guys will be in really good hands with Carly. She oversees the program update. So she's very involved in this process. And maybe up until I leave, sending it to both of us too. Next slide, please. I think that's it. I think it's time for questions. I know people have been asking questions in the chat. So please feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself if you have questions. I see Justin has a question about how does reporting on concentrators work. So Justin, we asked that actually information is submitted at the course level, and we actually do the calculation for concentrators behind the scenes. So we don't ask you to do anything differently for concentrators. That information is just submitted at the course level every year. And then we go, oh, that student's now a concentrator because they met those requirements. So there's nothing different that you need to do. So Carissa is asking us to show the website. Carly, do I have sharing capability? So this is the trickiest thing, and this is why it makes doing these trainings so incredibly difficult virtually. When we're not virtual, we come in person and we sit with people and we help people work through things. We can't do that virtually because we can't share any student information with other districts. So that makes things super challenging, but I can show you how to get there. And then if Carissa, if you have additional questions, we would be happy to do a one-on-one with you where we can actually like dig into your data and actually look at stuff.
Okay, yeah, that'd be awesome. This is my first year, and the person that's been doing it hasn't, I have zero information. She just said, here's the website and you now have a login. So I don't know what file I use. I got the data from my teachers, or I'm getting it, but where do I put it? How does it get in there? Like, so yeah, a one-on-one would be amazing.
Yeah, if you want to shoot Carly and I an email, and I'll drop my email address in the chat here for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And then we can, I've got 1 week left, so we try to, if we can even do like 30 minutes just to give you like a crash course, I would be so happy to do that.
Okay, perfect.
Let's see, I see a question from Kim. My CTE staff are confused. What's a completer? So we actually don't have an actual definition for completer. I guess previously it was students who completed all the required courses. Since we're moving away from required, we really are trying to make that definition synonymous with career pathway students. So if you receive 3 or more credits in a program of study, you're a completer. I think that's what most people mean when they say completer. A concentrator could be a completer, because remember, a concentrator has to have a credit in intermediate or advanced level coursework. A completer doesn't necessarily. It's more about the number of credits than the progression through a program. This year, none of the students have completed their final assessment, i.e. project-based or FFA state degree. So not completers. That is not a component or a factor of completer. And I will say too, concentrators, completers, that's not affecting Perkins funding. The only funding that is really impacted by data and how many courses students are taking is that career pathways funding. Let's see, what other
Lauren,
questions?
Oh, there was a question. I don't think you answered it already. Work-based learning is required this year or starts next year.
Yeah, so it is required this year, and I don't think I said this, but we want to show a lot of grace to schools this year with the work-based learning experiences. We know that it's new, first time people are doing it, and also there's a lot of other stuff going on, and we recognize that this maybe is not a priority for everybody in both offering those experiences to students as well as the submission of that. So I do want to say everyone's learning, including us. So we want to show a lot of grace this year, but we want you to, it is required this year, but it's also a do your best this year. I think there was another.
Yeah, so
Charlene, so we don't have to submit assessment. Is that the same one you were looking at? So we don't have to submit assessments submitted by CTE instructors anymore. Correct. Yeah, no technical skill assessments. You can't, there's not even a place to enter that information anymore. The only thing is going to be credentials. And we can send out, when we send out, we'll send like a bunch of links and resource documents and stuff. We can add where you find which industry recognized credentials are approved, as opposed to the list of TSAs, which was like 8,000 combinations. There are only about, I think there's fewer than 100 industry recognized credentials that are approved. So it's a much more manageable list. And those of you who had to submit TSAs in the past know what a bear that was. I think, am I caught up? I think I'm caught up.
No, this is Ricardo. I'm sorry. I don't know how to raise my hand. Otherwise, I would have raised my hand. So the question I had, we always have to do somebody that is a academically disadvantaged 2.0 or less. Is that still going to be this year as well?
It's in there. And I think every year, just do your best.
Okay.
I know that that's like one of those things that people have to hand calculate. I put a little request into my IT group to get that field removed for next year because it is, I don't know where that field came from. I don't know why we have it. I can't find it in any law to, like we didn't have to report that in Perkins 5 or Perkins 4. So I think it might be a holdover from Perkins 3 maybe. So that's been like 20 years. So I'm working on getting that removed because I know that is a question. TSAs, we got rid of that. That was like the number one question that I got. The second one was academically disadvantaged. So I'm working on getting rid of that. My philosophy is that if we are not using it for anything, then why are we making schools collect it? So yeah, working on getting rid of that too.
That would be wonderful because that is a pain.
Ricardo, I think about you every time I look at that field because I feel like we talk about this field every year because it's like, why do we collect this? And I totally echo that because I wonder that every year too. So I do, yeah, I have a request in to get it removed for next year. So and I'll make sure to ping my people before I leave too, like, hey, don't forget that we're going to remove that next year. What else? What other questions do folks have? We still have over 60 people in here.
Maybe if we could just get a recap one more time about what is the changes about the actual submissions this year. I heard no TSAs instead of the credentials. Work-based learning is new, the 0 in the course codes. Watch for that. Anything else that's actually changed as far as the submission goes?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, the only things that are changing is the only new fields, I will say, is the work-based learning fields. Those are the only new ones. The industry recognized credential, while they will have different, the name of the field is different, is really the TSA field, but fewer options, basically. That's where we reported industry recognized credentials previously. We just have made that list a lot smaller. So it's new in the sense that the field is titled something different, but it is essentially the same thing, just less of a burden, I think, than before. But those two work-based learning fields are the only things that are new. So there's those 6 options in there, well, 7 with the not applicable. And then the hours field, which is totally optional. You do not have to do that. So the only required new field is the work-based learning type codes. Other than that, everything is exactly the same.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I see a question from Charlene about the industry recognized credentials. So that information should be coming from your teachers. And again, we'll send out the list of what industry recognized credentials are approved in each of the program areas. But that information should be coming from your teachers. So they should, if you have a health sciences program, your health sciences teachers should say, I had these 3 students attempt their CNA credential, and these 2 passed. That all information should all be coming from them. How often are students earning industry recognized credentials? Josie, I'm not sure if you mean on what, like how often annually we have students receiving them. I'll be honest, there's not a ton in the state. I think last year we had under 1,000 students receive credentials or attempt credentials. And I imagine that number is going to be even lower this year because of COVID and just not being able to, because a lot of the credentials are done in person, like to show they're doing something hands-on and they're showing. Yeah, not a ton. And again, teachers should really know that. And for those of you who have agriculture programs too, I think it's important to note, I think it's part of the statewide agriculture portfolio is one of our industry recognized credential. It is because it's a portfolio, there's multiple pieces to that. So students have to do a couple of different things to receive that credential. So just so you know, we do not want that information until they have received the credential, done all of the pieces of that portfolio. That is when they have received the credential. So we get that question a lot. Not until they've completed all of those pieces do we want that information. And Josie, there should be a field for that in your student information system as well. That one I feel confident is in student information systems because that collecting the credentials has been around for a while. So you should see that. And I'm not sure. I think that's kind of a case by case basis, but I don't know if teachers typically enter that information into student information systems, or if that's, I know in some cases teachers drop off like a handwritten list to their data submitters, but that should definitely be going into your student information systems.
There is another work-based learning question. For cooperative work experience, is that any job the student is doing instead of being at school for a period?
I'm hoping maybe Gabby is still on the line to answer that. She may have stepped, I see her name, but she may have stepped away for a moment. Let's couch that question and then hopefully Gabby will be back and we can ask her that. She's really, I don't think I mentioned it, but Gabby's our work-based learning and apprenticeship specialist. So that is her bread and butter. I talk about it just from a data perspective, and that's very like surface level. She's the one that can answer all those really like in the weeds questions about work-based learning. And I see, we'll skip ahead to Pamela's question. Our health sciences teacher usually offer and oversee the CNA certification. Due to COVID this year, they were not able to meet in person to do this. Does the CNA certification need to be overseen by our CTE teacher, or can the student enrolled in our health services course receive the CNA certification another way? And will this count for our student? If it is the industry recognized credential for CNA and it's administered in a different way, doesn't matter to us as long as it is an accepted credential. So the CNA is absolutely an accepted credential. How that student receives that doesn't matter to us as long as they attempted it. There's still over 40 people lurking on here. I don't know if you're all waiting for other people to ask questions, but. Oh, we had some people drop off. Ricardo, are you asking in regards to like a startup program of study?
Yes.
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. The requirement in the past has been if a startup program is receiving, I think there's like a 30% Perkins allocation for startup programs of study. I think regardless of whether your program has accepted that or not, you should still do it because we start banking data for career pathways as soon as you start submitting it. So, and then at that point, when that program goes from a startup to a full program of study, that program then becomes eligible. So you want to start getting some historical data in there as soon as possible. So I would absolutely recommend that. And Charlene, awesome question. As part of the email that Carly will send out to everybody, there will be a link to where to find the definitions for each of those workspace learning experience types. I didn't put them in the presentation because they're very wordy, and I figure sending that out after the fact so you all can read through them is a better way to do that. But yeah, she will send those as part of that email. Karen, I would recommend definitely setting up a meeting with Carly to talk about combining programs and when to do that. This summer is a fabulous time to do that as we're transitioning to our new data system. This is like the best year to do that. But Carly and I have done a ton of calls around combining programs. A lot more people are going to more general programs. So yeah, definitely try to connect with Carly before you leave for the school year.
Perfect.
Gabby, I don't know if you wanted to jump in and
Yeah,
answer.
my apologies. Can you repeat? I'm going to look at Karen's question again, but if there was another one, if you don't mind me asking, would you mind repeating it?
Let's see. I think was it the question from Charlene? Was that the one? Okay. So for cooperative work experience, is that any job the student is doing instead of being at school for a period?
Oh, good question. So Charlene, can you share, so is the job that the student doing tied to a program of study? Okay, so then that would not be something that is collected in our student data collection for Perkins. So good question, Ricardo. When it's tied to a program of study, we're talking about something that is the student is enrolled in that program of study, and the work-based learning experience is going to be tied to what they're learning in the classroom, right? So there's going to be some sort of, whether it's a standard from that career area. Again, we're talking about sustained interaction with community professionals, business and industry. They're learning those firsthand. They're doing firsthand engagement and tasks that are related to that career field. They are, sorry, I have a dog that's trying to chew on a hot spot. And it's tied to that program of study. So we have to be able to verify and look at whatever that experience that they're doing is aligned academically, technically, and professionally to that program of study, and for it to count for work-based learning in the Perkins data collection. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't count in other areas. or in other classes, if you will, whether your school district or your school offers a credit around career and guidance or counseling or things like that. But for the work-based learning, for the Perkins 5 work-based learning data collection piece, it needs to be tied to a program of study. Go ahead, Karen.
So I have a question about that. So we have a work experience class, I guess, where they're actually getting experience outside of the classroom in a work environment. If we can show that that particular job that they're doing meets the criteria of their courses or their program of study, then that would qualify. Or if
Yes.
maybe, like, for example, they work at Jerry's and they're trying to do the woodworking. You know.
Yes.
Okay, so then we
Yeah, so
really have
these-
to kind
so-
of vet each one of those to make sure that
Correct.
they go with their, okay.
Yes, and that vetting process could be, so you bring up a really good point, Karen. This is, you could have an embedded work-based learning experience, or you could have like an independent course, like a work experience course.
And that's really what ours is.
Yep. And then it could also, which also you can tie that into that pathway, if you will, or that course of study, then that would count for the Perkins data collection.
But it doesn't have to be like literally listed on our program of study, does it? Because it's
No.
separate. Okay.
Right.
And I think, Gabby, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think some people are embedding a work-based learning course into their program of study, but it just still has to meet all of those criteria. But I think most are not doing it that way.
Right. There's a lot of, and we're walking that fine line, if you will, between what is going to quote unquote count for Perkins 5 and also all the other activities that a school may offer focused on getting students those types of experiences, regardless if they're in a CTE program of study or not. We are trying to not say that, we are trying to say CTE is one way a student can have a work-based learning experience, knowing full well that not all CTE programs of study are going to be able to offer work-based learning.
And certainly
So
not
if
to
you
every
do
student.
Correct, or to every student. And I think, Karen, you had a question about your CNA students, I believe. Was that you or was that someone else? And I'm just confusing them. I'm sorry. If
It
I
was just
am.
somebody else, but that's a good question.
Okay. Pamela. Is she still here? I apologize, Pamela. So does the CNA certification need to be or senior CT teacher, or can the student enrolled?
Gabby, I answered that question already. It was really about the administering a credential in a different way than they normally do because of COVID. And that's totally fine.
Yeah.
It's just about whether they attempted the credential or not how it was administered. So
Yes. Okay. Thank you. My apologies again, everybody. I'm managing some family stuff on top of this. So I appreciate your patience as I'm stumbling across my own feet here. So, okay.
Can you imagine how badly I would be stumbling on these if you were not here? So.
Okay.
I just got some.
Shirley,
I was going to say I got some a couple of good questions via email. I think maybe this person was not in the training and they just happened to there was something in the ether that they felt.
okay.
So they asked about reporting industry recognized credentials for a student last year. Do we report it again this year? No, that is during that one school year. Same with work-based learning experiences. A student may have a school-based enterprise experience their sophomore year if we want it for that year's data collection. They may have a pre-apprenticeship experience their junior year. We would want that to be reported during their junior year. So it's whatever happened during that school year. So no cross submissions, and definitely not with credentials too, because there is funding tied to that. So it needs to be what was done that year, since that funding is only good for that 1 year for a credential.
And I also see Charlene had asked, what is school-based enterprise experience? And I'll take that as one right now. So when we talk about student school-based run enterprises, that's also a student-run experience or enterprise that students are maybe running a some of the best examples might be from like a manufacturing class where they're created their own quote unquote business, if you will, and are helping local communities, organizations around also around, you know, maybe they need some prototypes or they have some projects that they could have the students do. And they do everything from quoting to project management skills to then running the prototypes or the parts and then selling them to the customer. So they're really getting a sense of what it's like to run a business. And so the students are running that in conjunction with the employer or whoever they're working with as a team, if you will. That would count as that sustained piece for that project. And so that would be a school-based enterprise. We see that a lot, you know, coffee shops, for example. Again, it needs to meet those 4 criteria, you know, aligned with the CTE program of study, sustained interaction, happens in a variety of different ways. You know, it could be in person, virtually, simulation, and then also an earning of a credit or and outcome verification. So that is what a simulated, a school run or school-based run enterprise would be. And Charlene, I say, so if every student, for every student, if we have to fill in, see, okay, that might be a Lauren question there from Charlene.
Yeah, I'm hoping, and I know, like, I'm just going to be really frank here that this first year is going to be messy. Like, that's the reality. It's it's new stuff and it's really nuanced. And, you know, I'll be frank, it was not the priority for a lot of people and student information systems to get this stuff, all these new fields in and incorrectly into the systems. So I anticipate that data is going to be rough. And that it could be very painful this year. I recognize that. I'll be totally clear about that. My hope that is going forward, what student information systems should be and should be doing is those work-based learning fields should be defaulting to a Z, and you should just have to update them when it is not applicable. So when they actually do have an experience, that you would just change it to that to relevant code for whatever type of experience that student got. But it should be defaulting to Z because, let's be real, the vast majority of students are not having work-based learning experiences, especially during the last school year. So yeah, totally recognize that is a lot to enter in. So, and that's another reason that we got rid of technical skill assessments, to try to free up time for this, knowing that it would be a lot of work, and the technical skill assessments had been a lot of work in the past. And yeah, so work-based learning is during that school year. So a student might have one their sophomore year and then never have one again, and we only want it for the year that the experience occurred. And I also, I put the link to on our district website for the student collection. And if you actually click on that link and scroll down to the public report section, and this is something Carly will send out as well as part of that email, under public reports, there's all these lookup value tables. And there is the third from the bottom, lookup values for work-based learning type code. And that will give you the different type codes and all of the definitions for the types that we've talked about today.